I want to thank Deputy O'Riordan and the Labour Party for bringing this bill here today. And along with my colleague Minister O'Gorman, I support the Government's decision not to oppose the private member's entitled Autism Bill at this stage in the process. And I'd like to bring you through my thought process on that, if that's okay with your good selves. And I've read through it really intensely, what you've proposed to it. And that is not a million miles by any manner or means from my autism innovation strategy that I have got up and trying to pull together at this moment in time. You talk to all the pillars within it. You talk to housing, you talk to education, you talk to post-primary education, higher education, you talk to employment, and Deputy Nash spoke really clearly about that, which I hope to have that legislative piece from 3 to 6% addressed, and when the ADMC bill when it comes to pass, that is included as part and parcel of it. You have spoken exactly to all the pieces to why I found myself with developing an autism innovation strategy. And we have to remember that while a lot of people and a lot of governments might have talked of it, this government is actually doing it. And the reason I'm doing it is because I can see in all the various departments where we're actually failing families and children with autism, from the very early years to actually transitioning through into higher education, out into employment and to accessing housing. That is why I have done it, so that ensure that we can have that consultation piece where the persons that are in the autism community, whether it's the advocates or whether it is the individuals themselves, they actually shape the strategy. It's not the legislators, it's not us. I want it to be led by the people that are most impacted. And the reason by doing it that way then is, we all know in this House that education has been failing, and we also know that health is failing. And why is health failing? Because health is a needs-based, and education say we need to have a diagnosis, and social protection say you need to have a diagnosis, and if you don't have a diagnosis we can't support you. So it's trying to have the breakdown of those barriers to actually say, how can we make a functioning system work? How can actually cross-government, cross-department, cross-sections work, cross-state bodies work to ensure that there is actually better delivery? And yes, on Friday we're seeing what is going to happen. But you know what? We knew that, in actual fact, that the process was too long. 21 steps, 18 months was not a functioning part of it. Bringing it back to 8 weeks perhaps will make it, perhaps it will also ensure that more within education will also step up to the plate, that we should no longer should parents and advocacy groups have to go continuously begging. And I want to acknowledge everybody that's here in the groups, in the gallery, from Involved in Autism, as I am, FUS, Inclusion Ireland, and compliment and say, yes, I appreciate all the work that you're doing, but it is wrong that you should have to be continuously doing this. That's why I do believe in this strategy, that there should be various pillars that you and I think everybody in this House agrees, where we need to have the pillars, where we need to have that level of cross-government understanding of what autism is about, of actually what's required within their departments. I do believe there's a complete lack of understanding, lack of awareness, lack of empathy, lack of implementation, and that's what the strategy is about. And that's why I'm hoping that come by the end of this year, when it is going out for its second piece of consultation, Deputy, I will invite you to feed into that. I would love the Labour Party to feed, and all parties to feed into it. And that's not weightless words. That is where you will see your input as part and parcel, as I have highlighted, as I've gone down through here. You can see all the ticks. I agree completely on everything that is there. But what I'm asking of the Labour Party is to give me the opportunity to see, does the strategy work? And that speaks to Deputy Collins's point. Tell me why you're not supporting and why you are not supporting the Labour Party. The reason I want to see, does the strategy work first? I am not opposed to legislation. I am not opposed to it. What I am saying is I want to see, can I make the system work? Can I actually use my piece as a minister within that department of equality and inclusion, make other cross-departments work, where we put the children and their families at the centre, and put them at the centre when it comes to education, health, housing, employment, transition and planning. And where I have seen the system work in the last number of weeks is with Minister Harris in relation to higher education, where he launched a particular plan for the next 5 years of 3 million every single year for accommodation works for children transitioning with autism and needs into higher education. That's how the system should work. That's talking to the system and actually having that inclusive piece within it. But we now need to go really back to the start, to the early years piece. So we know that the AIMS process works in the early years. That should be the transition piece that brings us into primary, secondary school and post-primary, taking the learning from there. And I speak again to what Deputy Collins rose there in relation to the CD&T teams, and I think I cannot leave the floor without acknowledging, because you have met with the parents, and one of the biggest barriers for accessing a lot of the services is actually to do with the health aspect of it. So in the last number of weeks, what I have done is I have put and written to the HSE that critical skills list, that therapists, OTs, physios, speech and language should be added to the critical skills list. They weren't there. They will be there now. They were not there. Having training behavioural therapists in NUIG in Galway and not having a behavioural therapist pay scale within the HSE is wrong. I have asked the HSE to find the pay scale and actually add behavioural therapists to it. We're talking about autism. Behavioural therapist has to be part and parcel, a core piece of it. In relation, critical skills. Also, we know the figures that have come out. There was no new news on that for me last week as to how many therapists we don't have. The reason the PQ was put in is that people couldn't believe when I said it at committee that I actually was being as open and honest about it. The PQ went in, the answer came out. But what we need to do is we need to pause the IFSPs. We need to deliver on the intervention. Where I have therapist teams delivering 66% of their time on a desktop exercise and not delivering an intervention, that's wrong. It's wrong until such a time as the teams are fully populated. And until the teams are fully populated, 90%, I cannot use student therapists in third or fourth years to actually be part of the assessments for the simple reason clinical governance and clinical oversight. So we need to bulk up the teams. And the final piece in relation to CD&Ts, what needs to happen here is every one of our CHOs up to this, they had only 25,000 euros is what they used to use for assistance to do with perhaps purchasing private assessments. 25,000 in an annual basis wouldn't buy them 5 therapy interventions. It's not enough. They have to actually go to the European level of public procurement. So as we have intervention and assessment on a twin parallel approach, it can't be either or, it must be both. Until such a time as enough therapists, and I go back again to Minister Harris, with adding extra therapists on this week of the 1,056, there's a proportion there held for OTs, physio, speech and language and psychologists. And when those therapists come on board, at that stage perhaps we might have the capacity for in-house doing those assessments ourselves, but until such time we cannot leave families waiting that 4 or 5 years. And in relation to the PTAs, like that PTA stop was a direction that came from my department to pause it. The court case made its decision. Let's stop faffing around. Let's just pause it. Let's find another agile way of approaching it. Of the 10,000 that are there at this moment in time, 4,500 of them are critically in need of an assessment, and there's a plan being devised as we speak for that at this moment in time. So what I say to the Labour Party, while I might not have given the response that was wanted, that does not mean to say that I am totally opposed to legislation. What I really want to do is I want to see, can I deliver? Can I make a whole of government approach work? I need to ensure that, I'd like to think we could. We've seen how it has happened in the cancer care strategy. Why can't we do it within autism? And I do believe what it's important to say, I have found a willingness within my colleagues within government to want to work with me. And that is awfully important. But now what I need is I need officials to actually buy into the contributions that have been made from the families and the persons directly impacted. And while I might not often agree, if at all, with Deputy Barry, housing is a big part of this. And we need to understand housing, even accessing housing. Even the diagnosis of housing for persons with autism isn't on some county council's radar at all. So that is what I am trying to do. I do welcome the debate because I normally don't get a chance to actually express my knowledge of it, but I also want to acknowledge the work that you and the party have done in giving me the platform to share with you today. But I do want to work with you on this, Deputy.